Cheers.
Cheers.
What's your idea?
Scare me.
Wait, like...
You scare me, I'll scare you.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
How's it going? Andres.
Yes,
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
of course. Thanks for joining.
I like your office.
Thanks. It's a little makeshift thing at my parents' house.
Oh, rad. Well, I'm on the floor of my bedroom, so we're
I had that too, and it worked sometimes, and then other times I was like, I don't like this, but you gotta do what you can, I guess.
Got to do with what you got. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen the movie a few times. I think you've noticed once or twice, but I adore this film. I think it's so funny and creepy and spooky, and it's everything that I felt was also like such a great precursor to certain things. Like I think it was a moment early on that I realized how much I wanted like a horror marathon that I wanted to show with friends, and I knew that this would be the film that would start it.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Like I knew that it was going to be like just enough, because it's so much of that spooky storytelling feeling that that it was just like, it's not enough. Like it's the type of movie I would also show friends who aren't into horror, to just sort of be like, I know it says scare me, but just trust me that you're gonna have a good time, you know?
It's a gateway. Yeah, it's not too scary. It's not too much, but it's like gets you in the mood. That's been such the pleasure of all this, is kind of seeing people, especially who are like, this is gonna be my Halloween season constant, which is rad. You know, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to make something that had a rewatchable quality to it, and you know, for all the criticism we get about maybe pacing, or about for the real horror fans who are like, there's not enough blood and dismemberment. For everybody who's going, there's just something about it. There's just this vibe. There's this style to it that makes me want to watch it. Bearably watch it 2 or 3 times. It blows my mind. So thank you.
Right, but like for people who like, I love gory films and I love the scares and everything, but when it comes to that, I'm like, I have those movies. I have those on the side that I can.
We can do that any night. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I want this, because even, for example, like I'm dying to show this to like my family, my girlfriend. Like there are people who aren't necessarily into horror, but I'm like slowly trying to give them the gateway films. It's sort of like, now it's like you love, for example, like The Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor. Like they're scary and spooky, but they're obviously so much more dramatic at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you get this, and it's like, let me show you something else similar. Right.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
I also laugh at the fact that it's a great like opening title card.
Yeah.
That no matter how many times I've seen it, it still gets me, even though I'm like it's coming, and I was like,
it's because it's that silence, right? Well, first of all, so that is a total rip on Insidious and Drag Me to Hell, and I just watched Freaky. And Freaky doesn't say Christopher Landon. So it makes me feel good, because I feel like in the horror world, all of us, like some of us horror filmmakers, like we know we're taking that from probably Sam Raimi.
Of course.
You know, he did that first, blah, you know, but it's just so fun. I mean, it's at least for, you know, a movie it doesn't get much scarier than that title drop. But yeah, thank you. I'm glad you appreciate that.
Well, even I think Drew Goddard's like Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I got to see that.
Oh, you do?
Or again, I have to see it again. But we watched for the title. Oh yeah, I've seen Cabin in the Woods a few times. But yeah, he does. I remember that.
And I think that one's always, it's a bit more comedic, because it's like they're like about to get in like the little golf cart, and they like
right.
spill coffee on themselves, and then it just comes, and you're like, oh shit. But I definitely got like a lot of like Drag Me to Hell vibes, I think, throughout the film, especially
one of my favorites. It's one. Every time I have an interview, I remember a favorite horror movie, and I change my letterbox. Like I was trying to be all clever. Like I was like top 10, and then it's like top 8, top 12. Oh yeah, wait, I can't forget about Drag Me to Hell. That might be one of my favorites, next to Dead by Dawn. Successful horror comedies that actually have like real scares. You know.
I've had like an interesting like history and relationship with drag me to hell. But they showed it in my high school auditorium. I think I'm guessing the year after it came out. But they showed it, and I remember watching it with like with majority of the school just being like, "What the hell is this?" And at the time, I was slowly getting into horror, so I also didn't really understand like Sam Raimi's like sensibilities and the way he loves slapstick and horror and just like all this gore.
Yeah.
Now I watch it and I'm like, this is both hilarious and like terrifying.
I think it's brilliant. And for him to rope in still two practical effects. I mean, the goat, it's it's really, really fun stuff. It feels like you're watching the best, most kind of punchy graphic novel. My favorite style of it, just like elements of gothic horror, laugh out loud moments, practical effects, a different kind of hero, a sort of gray area heroine. Yeah, I love it.
So for Scare Me, where did some of the story come from? Because was it sort of similar to like the actual film where it's about you two just sort of riffing on story ideas, and then you're like, you know what, I have an idea now.
Well, the stories, the anthology story. Well, the story just came from the confluence of things. I mean, I knew I wanted to write a genre film, and I wanted to work off of an awesome actress and give her the opportunity to kind of have an actor showcase, similar to how I would be writing one for myself and directing one for myself. So I thought within the context of, okay, I love these types of movies. I love anthology movies, Tales from the Dark Side, Body Bags, Cat's Eye, it goes on and on, Trilogy of Terror. What about one that doesn't leave the campfire? Also because I can't afford to shoot that kind of movie. So we'll just do it with sound and create these objects in space, like some kind of, theater games, Paul Sills, Viola Spolin horror film. I knew ultimately I wanted to explore the gender dynamic side of it because what was happening in the world, Me Too was really picking up momentum by the time I slammed out that script. So without making it a preachy movie, I was excited to explore the gender dynamics and competition, especially a fragile white man feeling fragile and fractured and unable to self-soothe in the company of a woman's greatness and feeling entitled to her greatness and success. I was really excited about that being the heart of it. But as far as the anthology stories go, the stories themselves are almost all different versions of stuff that I've put in drawers that have been collecting cobwebs. Like Venus is an actual script that I started writing almost 20 years ago after a breakup about a zombie outbreak that only affects women, and that in the end, like all these like women zombies tear this guy's heart out, because I felt like that was my girlfriend was there. So I was like, I was like, okay, well this old ass idea, let's make this Fanny's big hit. And then all the other kind of pieces were to a version of or a hybrid of how can I showcase myself. I do this troll walk and I do these weird voices. How can we showcase Aya? She speaks some Russian. She does these accents. She can do these kids' voices. She does this physical comedy, and then just kind of piecing that together sort of retroactively.
I think that's something also I love is that watching, especially even afterwards when like Chris Redd shows up in the film, like all three of you is just, if you show me that and told me this was like your demo reel to speak of, like it's just like just a showcase of everything you can do, it'd be like, oh yeah, I 100% believe it, because I'm only recently familiar with Aya through The Boys. Yeah. And she like steals the show in every scene that she's in. Yeah. And then to see her in this, it's even more so, it's a lot more of like, oh, that's also what she can do.
Yeah. So this is after years of her being on this show where she explored elements of mental health and comedy and everything else. It's criminal. I haven't even finished the entire canon of the series, but of You're the Worst. But yeah, she's insane.
That's always been a show that a bunch of my friends always tells me to watch, and I'm like, I'll watch it, and then it just sits on my shelf that I just never get to.
Yeah, there's so many.
How is she and Chris Redd? How did they get involved with it?
Aya is a friend, was the wife of a friend of mine of many years. So I had known her, kind of running into her, mostly in the small town that we shot in. because she lives nearby. We shot in Woodstock, New York, and she's got a place nearby. So I'd always kind of interacted with her and exchanged pleasantries, and she was always just lovely. All while kind of being a fan of her with stuff she'd done, not only from You're the Worst, but Joe Swanberg stuff and Wolf of Wall Street. She popped up in that and was like absolutely stunning opposite Leonardo DiCaprio. If you go back and watch that, how she pulled tears and screamed, and just this ridiculous character, Jordan Belfort's assistant. And she was basically the first call, so it was this combination of accessibility. I know the most famous person I know in my proximity, Aya Cash. Why the hell not? She's always been lovely, super talented. Let me ask her. And her having just finished that show, and her looking to do something that was challenging, looking her to do her next role. I thought, well, this could be great. This could be the best of all worlds. She get to work from home, and we'll get to play together. And luckily, she kind of went for it. And then Chris Redd. We share the same manager. So I didn't really know who Carlo was going to be. I just knew I wanted him to, I needed diversity, first of all. I didn't want to whitewash this film. And B, I kind of left it up to sort of the universe and the team. Who can we get who's up and coming, who maybe hasn't had the opportunity to either play this type of part, A, or B, is just going to be a breath of fresh air to come in at the end of Act 2, or, the middle of Act 2. And so my managers and agents were like, this dude just won an Emmy. He's funny as fuck. He's got the best facial expressions ever, and he loves the script.
It's a deer! And that part scared the living shit out of me!
Or he ended up loving the script. We sent him the script, and we had a lunch meeting up in Harlem, and he didn't even get his jacket off before he was telling me how much he loved the movie. And it was just like one of the coolest moments. I mean, we had an awesome talk. And so yeah, that's how they came kind of into the fold. And then the coolest thing that happened beyond that is that Chris and Aya fell in love. I mean, they like really hit it off. Not just, in the context of the film, that chemistry is so palpable, but in real life, I mean, they really just truly, hit it off as collaborators, as creative kind of buds. And that really hit me in the heart. That was rad, because it was, we're making a small movie in the blizzards, upstate in the winter, and you two are having fun. That's the best case scenario for me. And it also helped warrant Fred's kind of unraveling, feeling ostracized as a third wheel, in this situation.
You could just sort of like, sorry, you guys should have the room. I'll walk out,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Guess I'm not wanted here.
It's funny because I think one of the films I've definitely revisited the most this year has been Pop Star Never Stop.
Yeah.
So I think and his scenes in that film always stand out to me.
Yeah.
And I think so, to see him play this as well, is just so funny, because you can definitely see again his not only his range, but just how funny, and then also how much people can love genre like horror films. So I want to ask is horror your thing as well? Is it just always been for you?
I was a horror fan before I was a comedy fan. So I have an older brother and sister. My sister Rachel, she specifically was the one to introduce me to horror, was the one who took me to see, I never forget this. There was one day when I must have been in 4th grade, and we were home alone. She's 9 years older than me. And she had the car, and so I was always wanting to hang out with both of them. But I'll never forget the day where she was like, you want to go see Jason Goes to Hell? And we got in her Volkswagen Rabbit and drove to the mall and saw Jason Goes to Hell. And I had the best time. And it's one of my favorite movie going memories. It was just me and my older sister and Jason Goes to Hell and Freddy's Glove in the end. And she introduced me to, I think she was my kind of gateway to horror, even watching Freddy's Nightmares, the spin-off series of, Elm Street and everything Freddy Krueger. Cat's Eye I remember watching as a family, and even Alien I remember watching as a family, which is kind of crazy. And we were in the VHS era, so the horror films specifically had that. Genre films in general, from Gothic and Monkey Shine to RoboCop, they had the most poppy, visceral VHS covers. So even if I didn't know what they were, Ghoulies, I wanted to watch them. I wanted them in my life. One of the posters on my wall, and I wanted to draw all of them. They were just so infectious, to my imagination. Now what you're seeing are filmmakers like me who've grown up in that era and have the ability to recreate that. That's why Stranger Things is so massive.
And I think that's funny because for me, my family's also been like a very big like movie family, and we would watch a bunch of different stuff over the years. When I was younger, I remember sneaking into the living room to see my brother and my mom watching the second Final Destination film, and being fascinated and not knowing, or being too scared from Jeepers Creepers or something else. And there was one time, I think I was 10, we moved into a house, and my room had a window that overlooked a cemetery. And my brother, who is 8 years older than me, decided to show me Pet Sematary for the first time.
How old were you again?
Like 10.
Yeah. Oh.
And it was the funniest thing, because I think it was also the first time I had a room to myself. So it went from us, like him showing it in his room, and then as soon as the movie ended and me being terrified, he's like, okay, you can go to bed now. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go stay up all night.
Yeah, Zelda,
Yeah.
Zelda's back. Oh my God.
So who are some of your, like, outside of, you mentioned Sam Raimi, but who are some of your other like inspirations?
So it depends on if horror inspirations or comedy inspirations or filmmaking inspirations. Is there any specifically you're looking for, or just kind of?
You can say all of them. I'll be listening to all.
Well, the first one that comes to mind are John Leguizamo and Robin Williams, because they were two comedians who I grew up watching, who made me, fall out of my chair laughing, even as a young kid, and even when I didn't understand all the references. And then B, to see them not only do and hold a one-man show, an audience in the palm of their hands, but do drama. Like I would watch Robin Williams's, what was it, at the Sunset Strip, in the special he did in the late 70s or mid 80s, and then I'd see him pop, in World According to Garp. You know what I mean? So for them to be able to do drama and do one-person shows, that was really, really appealing to me, and that inspired me as a performer. And then on the horror side, without even knowing his name, Wes Craven is a major influence. And now to revisit not only Wes Craven's work, but John Carpenter, and realize how impactful on the entire the entire industry. I even appreciate not just films like The Thing, my God, and The Fog, so visually stunning, but Memoirs of an Invisible Man. I went to the theater to see that movie. I've seen that movie probably 50 times, and he hated working with Chevy Chase on that movie. He hated making that movie. I've watched the behind the scenes of that movie. So there was my whole kind of life, I've watched those filmmakers and never quite knew, I never knew them by name, but I was always drawn to their kind of visual style, and that sense of dread was so unfortunately appealing to me. How morbid.
They're also, like, especially with Carpenter, like, they're both filmmakers who have had such massive careers that it's hard not to stumble on them. Like, there's quite a few references to like Jaws in the film, and a lot of like other Spielberg-like films. And it's the same thing where, like, I think growing up, before I started realizing who directed what, like, I knew I loved Spielberg just because I watched so many of them.
Dude, one of my earliest memories of watching a movie and crying, I had a TV in my room when I was far too young. I had older siblings, so I got the hand-me-down, small little box TV. and Heartland Express was on cable, and I must have been 5 or 6, but I remember sitting in my room watching that movie by myself, crying and watching Heartland Express, which for some reason the visuals in that movie can hold a kid that age. But when oh God, I'm going to say William Edgerton. I'll just say Walter Peck from Ghostbusters. He was lead. When Walter Peck died at the end, because the Ghostbusters shot him, when he was dying in that shootout, I was a kid. I was crying, and as a family, we would watch Jaws. I think that was maybe one of our only VHSs, and I would watch every Jaws after the fact. But Jaws is a major influence. It's a movie I can still pop on and catch small sort of details every time I watch it. I'm like, oh man.
It's definitely one of those films that I've realized just how great it is, like even more so than I think. Like it's like obviously it started blockbusters, obviously it was this big deal. And then there's moments like I'll just sit and it's them singing along the shanty near the end of the film, or them telling those stories while they're all drunk, and you're just like, I don't even care about the shark. Like I'm so captivated and I'm so like in tune with this that you're like, how do you do it? I think there was, I forget who it was, but there was someone who was sort of comparing Ready Player One, like, and saying like it might be minor Spielberg, but minor Spielberg is so better than most. Like it's so
masterful.
The thing, it feels like there are times where you'll watch him do something and you're like, are you doing this in your sleep? And then on top of that, it still feels better than anything I could ever do.
It's just so smart. I mean, I was actually, God, what was it? It might have been on a plane or on cable. They were showing The Lost World, Jurassic Park, The Lost World. And it was early in the film when Goldblum was talking to some bureaucratic type, and the blocking, the choreography of just him talking to this one or two other people, and how I can't remember if the camera rotated between Goldblum and these two gentlemen or this one person, but how he got her. I mean, it was just the blocking in Jurassic Park Lost World. It was like mind blowing to me, and so simple. And it's everything I wanted to emulate with, and with everything that I do, with having not even a fraction of the budget. I try to do it certainly with Werewolves Within, my other film, with 10 people in one camera, and telling everybody, okay, we're gonna do Spielbergian, we're gonna do Spielbergian choreography where you guys are gonna, walk in, but we're gonna be very specific about who we follow, and not, and very specific coverage and everything else. And of course, it turns out to, to my eye, be fine, but no one does it like him. No one does it like him.
Spielberg is one of those few, like, I know, taking like film classes and such, they always say like, watch the film without any audio and just like pay attention to the blocking, pay attention to the shooting. And I feel like Spielberg is one of those where I'm like, I could do that. Like I could watch his stuff without sound and still know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that's major.
How much was there improv? Like how much improv was in Scare Me? Because I feel like it was a lot. At the same time, perfectly scripted.
It was, well, we didn't have a lot of time to improvise, but I did encourage a kind of freedom with the script. So I told Chris and I, it's like, look, the script it's what you make of it. Like, put shit in your own words. Coming from the theater world, is like perfectly by the book. And she was, excited to kind of explore one-liners and quips. I mean, there's like a lot of the one-liners, a lot of the improv, honestly, was, in part from her. I mean, she would have these one-liners that just, and moments that would just like, blow my mind. But we didn't have a lot of time. I mean, I had Chris for 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
And I had Aya for 9 days of the 14-day shooting schedule. In fact, the 13-day schedule, because we got snowed out twice. We had to cut our day short on more than one occasion because of blizzarding. It was like the worst year for weather, I think in 2018 we shot, or early 2019. So, so yeah, it's so funny because it's a lot of the criticism or some of the criticism we get is like, what is this improv movie? With these three people talking. It's like barely any. It is a testament to the actors, a testament to the freedom that we all had on set. There's no other way to do it when you're doing something, of this scale. It's like, just come out and have fun, make it your own and play.
It was something like it felt like improv, but it was super naturalistic at the same time. Like, I think the one scene I had to rewind twice watching was when you're talking to Fanny and you're like, so, and you are, and she says, a classy lady.
Now, how old are you?
You don't ask a classy lady her age.
That's her. That's all her. That's improv. That's what. Yeah, and you are a classy lady. And also, one of my favorite moments is when I say, "How old are you?" and I say 38. And she goes, "Whew." That little like guffaw she does is so funny. It gets me every time.
She has these like it's somehow like both the punchline to the joke and the whole joke. Like it's so I don't know how she does it.
Yeah.
Um,
Eye cash.
how much of like Fred's writing process is like yours? Because to me, I remember there's a lot of times I'm writing and I'll look at my search history and it's just like key phrases and words that I don't know how to spell, or I'm like, that doesn't look right. Let me check.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, now I'm on Twitter. Shit. And then you're like, okay, let me get back.
That's so much of the writing process. You're reminding me of something Bill Persky said. He was a writer. He used to work on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and was it Dick Van Dyke? It might have been. I think it was Mary Tyler Moore. Bill Persky. He's a legendary TV writer who I had the pleasure of meeting years ago. And he said, the writer's process is you wake up, you have coffee, you sit at the computer, then you go to the window, you look out the window. You have lunch, you go for a walk, you sit down, and like rinse, repeat. Fred and I have similarities in the laziness and sometimes even the entitlement of the job or the opportunity or the genius of ideas coming my way, even when they're like not present whatsoever. And two, in the frustration and the sitting there and kind of, staring at the keyboard. But I like any other writer, or most writers will come down and probably write a half a page or a few pages, depending on like flow and lack of distraction from Twitter and from Instagram and all that stuff. I wish I had I'm in a small house with my fiance and we don't have, another place to kind of close the door other than, the bedroom to kind of be the office. And I prefer not to, to work in the bedroom. So if I can work after 1 a.m. or after midnight, like Robert Cargill and, like most of these other rad writers, I probably would, but it can be hard in a smaller space. But he and I have a lot of similarities, unfortunately.
Have you been able to be like productive? And on top of that, like how has COVID been for you? Like,
I was in a really privileged position because March 9th, I wrapped Werewolves. And then on whatever, the 12th or 13th, we were in lockdown. And shortly thereafter, I started editing Werewolves remotely. So for the majority of the year, or from, whatever it was, late March or early April until, I don't know, 3 months ago, I was editing and then kind of came out of that fog, kind of looking around going like, okay, now what do I do? And then we rolled into the release of Scare Me.
mm-hmm.
I guess it was, I guess that would make it March, or rather April until late September. And then in October, I was able to roll into kind of the distraction of Scare Me. So, in between all of that, I think with the excitement of finishing one thing and Scare Me coming out and watching people's reactions of everything, I've gotten inspired to try and get the next thing going. And, in this industry, when you're living paycheck to paycheck, you just got to have multiple things kind of at the ready. So I felt pretty inspired. I definitely had my days of feeling, kind of spent. But now I'm anxious to get everything ready for when the world is normal again, to get up and make the next thing. And especially anxious to see what the future will hold for werewolves, if the world will be normal and we'll be able to go, do like the theater thing and not release too early and, do it in a way where, we're all kind of back to our usual flow by, this time next year and people can enjoy it in the way that it was intended to.
Well, I mean, Warner Brothers seems not to think so.
I know. It's crazy. It's so crazy. I mean, selfishly, I'm excited because, I'm kind of a homebody and I'm like, hey, whatever, but by the same token, if I were Christopher Nolan,
Mhm.
who's understandably upset, and a lot of these filmmakers, you made this film to be experienced on a massive screen. I think there's going to be some kind of retroactive situation to sort of make up for this kind of lost theater time where we'll have a rotation of these films that will also release theatrically so that you can enjoy that experience at some point. That's just inevitable.
I think one of the crazy things about that is also that it's not like Neon or A24. Like it's not these smaller companies. Like it's fucking Warner Brothers. Like you're talking about like Dune, Wonder Woman, Godzilla versus King Kong. Like all these like massive films that are like, I think out of however many films there are, like I think there's like 2 or 3 of them that I was like, yeah, those ones I want to watch at home. The rest I would prefer in a theater.
Yeah.
Right.
Same.
So I think that's what. But even with like this year, there's been such a strong focus on VOD and like premium video on demand, which we didn't really have as much prior. It feels. This always felt like the next step. I just didn't think it was going to be them that did it.
I know. And it will, things will go back to normal. And there's this kind of fear that people are going to be so sort of, used to the home experience. I love that Fincher is kind of sitting there like, well, I don't care. I'll just keep making shit for Netflix and doing my thing and having full creative control. And I think he, like everybody else, or most people know that it'll come back. It's especially frustrating for especially a lot of the privileged folks at the studios and the filmmakers. They expected the theatrical experience to be a certain way. I mean, I can't imagine how it would feel to spend 2 or 3 years on something as massive as, Godzilla Kong and have it go to, release directly to your app.
I wanted to just give a shout out to like Brendan H. Banks, who your cinematographer kills it. Like there were some movies that I feel don't need to be shot expertly or like they're just like stay at home sort of stuff. And I think there was something about when I watched it on the TV a few days ago, like I was just like blown away at like there was so much little tiny aspects and jokes that I was noticing for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Then she feels those 2 beady yellow eyes staring at her from the air ducts.
He's killer. We mapped out every corner of that cabin because my big fear, it's probably his fear too, but my major fear, certainly as a director, was how the fuck are we going to shoot this entire movie in this house and make the house look interesting and make the house not turn your brain off. Part of that too has to do with costume design as well. Like there's literally a costume change in the movie when Aya removes this already kind of punchy, nice image to look at and reveals another punchy, nice image to look at, the horizontal lines versus the patterned sweatshirt against the kind of chocolate background, orange firelit background. My big fear was we're going to turn people off, watching this play, and luckily that's majority not the case. But, our goal is certainly Brendan's goal is how do we make every shot count? How can we be economical or economic with our shots, efficient with our shots, and make sure that we are telling the story, but that we're not overdoing it. And but Brendan has this fluidity and empathy about him where he is truly feeling the actors and the performances. And so there's this intuitive kind of almost like sensual nature to it where he can stop and go and kind of feel people out as they're doing their thing, and it you really do feel that, and it's the kind of films that we want to make anyway. I mean, Yorgos Lanthimos is a huge influence on me and just in the not just the sense of dread that he imbues, but everything is just so fucking interesting, and it doesn't have to be just, shot reverse shot. There's enough to be done about a profile two shot, and to be specific about the profile two shot.
But even there was at one point where you do have a shot reverse shot where I believe it's like sort of the above Dutch, and it's just like back to back, and I'm like, there's so much, as you brought up, like dread going on in this, that you're just like, it almost like like I want to look away, but I can't,
Yeah, to be right there too. Like we're both kind of, it's that power dynamic of being above, right? Yeah, and that was also an instance of, again, like how do we chop up each story and each emotional beat visually in this house without sort of repeating ourselves, So Venus is its own chapter. Venus is all about the fireplace. That quip is all about being up here. Troll is all about in and around the kitchen. The POV of the troll, low from the kitchen, sort of facing them and feeling a little more Raimi in its energy. Yeah, it was, there was no other way to do it. And I think the cinematography pays off in the sense that we wanted, both of us, as both of our first feature, we wanted to be super prepared. We storyboarded stuff, we shot listed everything far in advance of even knowing the location. And I think that's how we ended up where we are.
Who wrote the song?
I wrote the lyrics, and the songwriters are Chris Maxwell and Phil Hernandez. Their group, or their duo, they're known as the Elegant Two, and they do Bob's Burgers. They've been doing music for Bob's Burgers for forever. And I went to Chris and Phil and said, I want a South Park ballad. I want Bryan Adams, like South Park serious. And my friend Annie Kruger sang the vocals. And we I guess with how you're releasing this, right? So VOD is available now. So hey, you can now get the song on iTunes.
Oh, perfect. That was
the
my
album
next question.
Yeah. You can now purchase the song for your own enjoyment, and it's mastered and it's slightly different than the movie. So it's got some extra kick to it. So download it and enjoy it on a daily basis, like I did the South Park album. Listen to Uncle Fucker.
It was, I think, like, it's one of those songs that just, even going back to Popstar, where it feels like it could be a real song.
Yeah.
And it's definitely like, if I have a lot of friends, I'm someone comes from like storytelling, who loves lyrics and stuff, but I know a lot of people who just listen to the beat. And like, you can listen to that song and not have a clue of what's going on.
Yeah.
But then when you're paying attention to the lyrics, you're just like, oh my God, like, you're just really going for it.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't want to do my first movie and not have a musical sequence, because I'm a musical kid. I did musical theater as a kid, and I loved the South Park movie, and loved, Trey Parker and Matt Stone's musical sensibility. I think that had a big effect on me.
Would you ever do a musical?
I think I would. I know so many great choreographer buddies and musical buddies, great dancers, people like Cheyenne Jackson, who is in Werewolves, who would be so rad to work with in that capacity. I think it would be so fun, especially if it could be like somehow freaky as hell. Like, can you make something that's like Nightmare on Elm Street scary, but make it a musical? I think you can, like take it further than Sweeney Todd.
I'm trying to remember what the name is, but I know there was like a horror musical like a few years back.
Oh wow, like a legit horror musical.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but I will let you know as soon as I remember.
It could be like South Park music, like not serious, but like, if it's like South Park music that kind of is just like fucking bonkers, but truly scary and fun, and like, Carpenter Craven level visuals. I think that would be so fun to do.
It was like a slasher. I think the music was like operatic. Like,
whoa!
I would definitely have to check back and remind you. I sort of was wondering, like, to me, there, especially with like the entitlement and some stuff, it feels like there are parts that like deal with like the imposter syndrome, where you're like, am I supposed to be where? Like, am I supposed to be here? Am I doing enough? And all that sort of stuff. Was that something going into it?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't think what I've experienced personally is imposter syndrome, but I what I have experienced in the industry and in my personal relationships in the industry is a need for end gain, a need for the urgency to achieve success. And I've seen stealing, I've seen plagiarism. Like I've been Fanny, I've been Fred, and and especially in the context of the gender dynamic. I don't know if this answers your question, but and in this industry, and I felt it a little too in myself. That interesting competition that comes from from a privileged white male, and to see in your own industry, and this was more so. I'm talking about when I'm younger. I swear I'm self-soothing, but it's just an interesting feeling to notice, and certainly an interesting thing to observe in men specifically and in white dudes specifically, where it's like, well, no, I was brought up and taught to achieve and have this level of success. And rather than, notwithstanding it being related to an entitlement to when you see someone of a different, diversity, culture, race than your own, achieve a level of success that makes you feel like, well, I feel like I should have gotten there. For a woman to achieve it makes men, and I've observed, makes men feel, oh, it's a whole other it's like level of competition, psychosexual, bizarre ickiness that I just couldn't not write about. And I just think it's so fucking tasty, I guess. And I want to bring into conversation and hope that it like kicks off conversations in the future around maybe this movie and around other stuff. If I can always kind of keep some kind of inkling of that without doing anything too preachy, I think that's super cool. But to go back to your question, imposter syndrome, I didn't necessarily, I don't think I personally felt or experienced that. But I've definitely felt, behind, and I've let people who suffer from imposter syndrome and make themselves, boast themselves, peacock themselves to be bigger than they are. I've let that affect me. I've taken my eye off the ball, like we all do. We all have despair and compare and despair disorder, where we look at, who's doing better. But the people who are doing better are usually the imposters who know that what they're doing is, whatever, plagiarizing, impostoring, and just all around not being very, giving.
And again, the other, to add to that, it's also like you never know what they're going through, regardless either. So
No shit.
there's many layers. One point your character says, "I've also got something about werewolves." So like, at what point was this in relation to you writing Werewolves Within?
It was way Werewolves Within came way after Scare Me, and Mishna Wolf is actually the writer of Werewolves Within. I did revisions on it, but it was just crazy to have finished Scare Me, to have shown the producers who would be the producers, my producers on Werewolves Within, Scare Me, and that being the catalyst for them to kind of pitch me on the job. Total coincidence that it's, majority one location, also majority winter, same location. Like I brought folks back to the Hudson Valley. I love working in the Hudson Valley. It's where I'm from. To bring kind of business back to that hood is great. So there was just a lot of weird coincidences, and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to lean into this brand. But it is, make no mistake, it's a bigger movie, and it's fun as hell. I'm so excited for you to see it.
I'm very excited to see it. Because to me, I don't know about for your process, but there's been many times where I've tried to write something, whether it's a review, a script, whatever, and I'm like struggling and I can't get to it, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm gonna put this aside and then just start something else, finish it, and then be like, oh, I figured out that first thing. So in my head, I had like this idea, and I was just like, that maybe Scare Me was your way of trying to solve or figure out Werewolves Within, and now it's
so
that theory's out the door.
I mean, what it ended up being was a vehicle for me to solve that sort of stuck feeling that I'd had for many years leading up to that point, where despite, some success in the commercial world, I still wasn't making movies. I wasn't making my own thing. And so I was truly using what I knew from being stuck in the writing process to loving horror. I was, and also dusting off stuff that had gathered cobwebs and sort of going, let me just use all the pieces of the stuff I could never figure out and put it into this movie and just make it about that stuff. And I think there's a fun world where someday I think I will produce some version of Venus. I actually think that there's a really fun idea in there. It really is about how men sort of like when you're a little boy, or certainly when I was, I actually believed and empowered my mom to be the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-protecting. She was, I love my mom to death, but she's like a lot of our moms are. They have a controlling kind of way about them out of love. And I think there's something really interesting there, especially in the context of something larger, which is, this outbreak. But for now, it lives. The mythology of it lives in my little horror movie.
When you brought up, you wrote it after a breakup, and some of there's a scene when they finish acting out Venus, and they're just like, well,
it's about how men cling to their mothers. These invincible, infallible humans who can do no wrong.
While accurate and possible, was that in your thinking when you wrote it initially? Because I've seen on Shudder, there's been the Eli Roth's like history of horror, and I've been watching it, and there's a lot of like films where they'll sort of dissect and be like, well, this film's about this, and I'm like, oh shit, why am I never realized that that's what vampires could stand for, or why this could stand for this. So there are times where either brighter people than ourselves, either too connected to a work or something, or even us growing older, realizing that second, third meaning in it. How long did it take you to be like detached from Venus to sort of see that potential look?
That's a really great question. I think it took a few years, because again, I wrote that one, or started writing it, got to my 30 some odd pages 10, 20 years ago. I mean, we're talking like, no, it wouldn't have been a full 20. It probably would have been more like between 15 and 16 years ago. And when I wrote it, I thought it was about one thing. And then, by the time I had enough experience as a writer, enough experience with, writing with a theme or a drive or an engine in mind, and maybe how that might play into the larger context of a piece. Scare Me in this instance. I think only maybe between 3 and 5 years before Scare Me did I realize, oh, actually, I guess that's what I could feel in my body, but I couldn't articulate Venus was about. If that answers your question. Yeah, it's been interesting to see people like there's an awesome podcast I'm going to do at some point called the Necronama Pod, or Necronama.com podcast, and they had 3 authors dissecting, thanks to Gemma Amore, who's a writer in the UK, who's a big fan of Scare Me. It was very flattering, and they take an hour and a half or an hour and 10 minutes to dissect Scare Me, which is such a privilege, and a selfish privilege to hear people talk about your work, and they're giving extra meaning, especially from their experiences. Like Gemma is a real Fanny. She says, I've been Fanny before. I've been in these situations as a woman, as an author, and in that creative field where I've experienced what she has. And they being people that are more intelligent than I, were articulating and bringing value, meaning, and symbolism to my movie, far beyond what I had perceived it to be. But that's what art just is and does. That's what especially folks like you, if you're writing about films and the meaning of them and the impact of them from a critical standpoint, I think that's always going to be the case in perpetuity. That's just part of our culture, right? Is finding meaning in all things in art, and it's supposed to mean different things for different people. Songs are always going to mean different stuff for people who listen to them versus whatever Bob Dylan or Taylor Swift writes it.
That's why I think something on our site that we do is we very much lean into like the personal, right? So like I've seen other places, and I know a lot of like film criticism sort of tells you not to sort of go, and they want to be like just be analytical and stuff. And while we still do that, we still like the whole reason why I ask my friends, "What did you think about the movie?" is not did they make a good movie? It's did you like it, right? And whether that is um, something simple or silly that was just like, yeah, Fast and Furious is a fun movie, or if it's like something meaningful, like I'm curious to know that. So that's something I've always prided on for our site to sort of being like, well, don't be afraid to sort of just be like, I'm going to spend a paragraph talking to you about something that happened when I was 11. If you're going to read it, you read it. If not, like it's there, right? So that's something sort of that we've always kept trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I realize now watching this that I really want to do like a writer session just like this, just sort of to hang out and just because it seems like not only would it be a really fun time, but you could walk away because there's nothing better than when you're trying to pitch something to someone and uh, early on, like when you first pitched the werewolf idea, and like Fanny's like was like, well, that's an idea. That's not the whole thing, right? And you there's that look in Fred's face where you're just like, it's like, what do you mean? No, it's good. Like I'm telling you, it's good.
Yeah.
You're like, well, it's not all there, and then you start trying to crack it with someone else, and then you realize what it is supposed to be.
I've been there, and it's so valuable to have people in your circle that you trust, that you can bounce that shit off of, that can challenge you. Because I've certainly been the one to not only be resistant to criticism or to not having a full kind of a fullness to the idea and a multi-texture to the idea, but I've also been the one to challenge folks and bring it out of folks. And that can come from different places. It can often now it comes from a place of goodness and wanting to bring out the potential in my friends' work. When I was younger, it was me feeling butthurt that maybe I knew anything wasn't fully there because I'd always hit the wall at page 30. I would free write. I wouldn't outline. I didn't really know what my ending was, or worse, my middle, but I knew my beginning and my end. Middle's the hard part. So yeah, you got to be willing to challenge each other and do it in a healthy way and bounce ideas off each other. And by the way, I mean, I just had a breakthrough creative revelation. I think God, it was yesterday. I'm just sort of pitching something. I know this is great, but in the back of my mind, I know it's like not fully great. But I'm saying, yeah, because I just want to get the thing kind of going. People are saying, it's not quite there. What if? And that one little what if nugget had me just like my mind supernova,
Yeah.
Way better idea now that they challenged me and threw that out there. Now it's become something I hadn't seen before, written before. I'm excited to write about.
Even if it's not like the right idea to put you in, it might be the one that like pushes you the other way. Because then you've always had like been like, no, that doesn't make sense for that character. This character would do that, and then you're like, oh, you know what? Give me a second, right?
Yeah.
Is
You
Jaws
gotta be willing.
is Jaws actually your favorite movie?
I think it is. I think Jaws. I hate to say it because it's like, Jaws. The only the biggest blockbuster of all time. But I fucking love Jaws. I've got a weird like top 5. Like I love Jaws, Defending Your Life, Little Children, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and like Let the Right One In. You know what I mean? It's like the most bizarre. But movies that really like make you kind of, I don't know, make you kind of feel, but make you laugh, but have this kind of pacing to them. And Jaws is just, I think if not for the sentimental value, I mean, now it's like to be able to rewatch it every year for 37 years or 30 years and to find something new every time and to enjoy something every time or appreciate something, pick something up, learn something every time is really, really incredible.
I had one day I was starting a new job, and a friend of mine now who like was realizing I was into films and everything. He was working at films and on film sets and such. He sort of just like turned to her and he goes, "Give me your top 10 right now." And I was like, "Oh God, this is the most terrifying thing." And as I'm sort of giving him some of them, I think my top two personally go back and forth between Zodiac and Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh man, Zodiac. God damn.
And he, one of the films that would be on my top five is Magic Mike XXL. And he sort of stops and he goes, "Okay, shut the fuck up. Tell me your real list." And I was like, "This is real. Like this is." And he's like,
Right.
"That can't be on it." And I was like, "Have you seen the movie?" And he goes, "No, of course not." And I was like, "Watch the movie and then we'll talk."
Yeah.
So there's definitely like I've got to like early on. I used to be a guy who hated boy bands. I hated this. I like dislike certain types of movies because of certain actors or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you just get to a point where you're like, I dislike the term guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you like something, who cares? Just like it.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
if that's something that's in your top five, then so be it. And maybe that's
That's what it's so funny. That's what us as dudes too. It's like there's a stigma. It's like you can't sit. Like I remember for years, even till whatever last year, I'd say Tom Cruise. That's my guilty pleasure. Tom Cruise movies, guilty pleasure. It's just it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to watch the man run.
Yeah.
Disasters.
He does it so well.
He does it so damn well. And all of us are kind of like, I wish I looked that great in that suede jacket and black jeans. What can I say?
I've laughed and told my friends, I was like, I think I realized that I have more crushes on like male actors and female.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and
because they're kind of adoring. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just like, really? And I was like, yeah, like it doesn't feel the same when I'm like, oh, that actress is attractive or whatever. But then, and I was like, oh no, I will watch Adam Scott do anything ever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I feel that way. God, we just watched Shame for the first time last night. Just like Michael Fassbender. It's like this is such a bleak movie, but you're just like watching this like masterful dude take on the most challenging thing I certainly would never feel comfortable doing. But that's really really well articulated. I appreciate you saying that. It's true. More people should, especially men, and with the stigma of man, especially in the context of today, it's like it's okay to just say what you like, from the having feelings to feeling about X, Y, or Z movie, actor, music. It's all good. It should all be accepted and warranted.
I remember like me and one of my guy friends who I sort of started all this criticism with a podcast years ago. We're the ones who went to see Magic Mike XXL in theaters. And, it was sold out. It was all women. And we, like, walking in felt like, oh, we shouldn't be here, sort of thing. Like, it was just like this sort of like weird, it was that sort of stigma that we felt and we're giving to ourselves while we're watching it. And then halfway through the movie, like, it was just gone. Like, we were just like, oh, I felt so safe. I felt so free. Like, this felt so much fun. And then we walked out of the theater and we were like, that was arguably one of the best movie experiences I think I've ever had.
And that was Soderbergh again, right? He went back.
No, he produced it. I believe it was his like second. It was Greg or Greg Jacobs.
Crazy that he could make a sequel to that and for it to be as successful as bonkers. Soderbergh is I need to do a deeper dive on him because he's no joke. Blockbusters and iPhone movies and The Nick, and he's just like unflinchingly,
and everything in between,
and just experimental, technically proficient. He's no joke. That dude's a force.
At one point, Fanny says, or you're talking about like the writing process, because she brings up the fact that it's like a reader or a writer should read, and then Fred sort of like hits back saying, well, I watch a lot of stuff. And she goes, calls you a regurgitate hack. How are you able to, like, you use so many movie references in this film, but at the same time, they still feel so fresh. Like they don't, even though you're like referencing other things, it's just like, oh yeah, it's clear. You've somehow made it your own.
Thank you. I guess because I've watched so many movies, are such a big part of my life, and I'm also intuitive and in touch with my own imagination, my own brain. It took a while to kind of connect the two and be confident to put words to page, but it's kind of subconscious, or what do you call it? Like a freedom of stream of consciousness kind of process. So I'm sort of writing as obscurely and idiosyncratically as I can, and that's probably what the freshness is, or what you're picking up on. It's just how I talk to myself. It's my own personal language sometimes, or weird thoughts that I've had that I then put to page. And Mark Duplass articulated this really, really well, and does this when he gives advice to filmmakers on, Seed and Spark, or in this book, like Brothers, or Instagram, whatever, is when people are looking to like break out and make their own stuff, and write something that sort of separates them from everybody else. Part of that is writing as idiosyncratically specific to yourself as you possibly can. And that's everything I did with Scare Me. That's why Scare Me is, I think, kind of breaking through as this tiny sort of scrappy film, is because, on top of the fact that we just had a crew who was trusting of me as a first-time filmmaker, as a first-time movie maker anyway, it wasn't trying to emulate something that it wasn't. It was, I got as specific as I could to the shit that I want to see. And so I think that's where that freshness theoretically comes from. That's my language with myself. That's what movies are to me, and how I talk to myself about them, constantly referencing them. But also it's, I have the comedy in my bones, I guess, so that I then apply it to my own kind of comedic voice and quip and years of experience.
How early did you know that the final 20 minutes were going to get that dark?
So I always knew that there was going to be a switch in the third act, just like adaptation. We had been taking interviews with different producers, with different potential investors. And one of the people I spoke to was Ray Mansfield. And Ray Mansfield, he worked for QC Entertainment. And he basically was like, I'm not going to fund your movie, but I do think you should muddy the line in the end, rather than making Fred a light switch psycho, which I did in the original draft. He was like, why not muddy it? Make us wonder if he's roughhousing, if he's going to make a move, if he is actually crazy. And the result is actually so much more terrifying and so much more realistic. So you've this whole movie, the brilliance of that idea was essentially, you just spent this whole movie playing and creating story, and then the real threat becomes what a real threat feels like. This kind of ambiguous, I don't know in this real situation what's going to happen, and what it is. Fan theories can be fan theories, but what I know of Fred is that he doesn't mean it. He's just fractured and drunk, and it's the end of the night, and he feels a bit taken advantage of, and now it's roughhousing that becomes a game that goes too far. If he was a killer, he wouldn't be getting angry phone calls from Meredith. There's your kind of answer, and so anyway, I always knew it was going to take a turn. I just didn't know how much we'd muddy the line, and I'm really glad that we did. Ray Mansfield.
I think the transition is really well done, because do you drop the score, or sounds like you do?
I think we do. So the whole movie, you're hearing the soundscapes, you're hearing the score, and then at one point he says, "Can you hear it?" Right? And then he does it himself, and she says, "No, I can't." So in that end, I very consciously made the decision. We are fully out of movie mode now. We are fully out of, we're in a different situation, different camera mode, different part of the house, even just being kind of by the door, different, as different as we could be in that one location.
Have you ever seen Danny Boyle's Sunshine?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
All right. Well, this might spoil a little.
That's okay. That's all right.
But it's a film that's like about space. The cast is stacked. It's incredible.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy and
Chris Evans and Rose Byrne and everyone in there is a star. But they it sort of turns into a slasher. And
Oh.
but like I know I'm even when I watched it the first time, and a bunch of friends who when I showed it to them the first time, and they're just like, "What the hell happened? How did we get here?" And I'm like, "Watch the movie again. Like all the camera cues, everything is sort of like there from the beginning. It's not clear that it's gonna become a slasher, but it doesn't feel like such a disconnect. So I sort of felt the same way where it was like when that transition happened, there was part of my head going, "Wait, how serious are we?" But then very quickly believing and like being like, "Oh, he was pushed, he was drunk, there were all these sort of things that sort of like led to this."
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm glad you feel that way, and it's actually I think it's been fun to be a polarizing movie because some people feel it's just really interesting because it's either one or the other. People are either they fucking hate that we got here, and other folks are like, I had no idea that it was sort of coming, and that I actually don't understand. I don't understand how people maybe didn't see kind of to a degree, although maybe it's a piece of that is because like it's not so obvious through and through. It's just that Fred is like a quirky kind of like, you know, schlubby dude or whatever it is, sad sack. But it's been fun in a way to kind of see the extremes from lovers to haters, how we did get there and what that effect has on people. Because what that means is to me that it's effective, and that, you know, just like, you know, circle back to the beginning, I think that's what's going to make it for the people who do love it, that rewatchable Halloween season thing, right? Is you know, you do get your version of the horror film ultimately, the real version, and then you get all the kind of tastiness, the, you know, Halloween candy stuff of the anthology beforehand.
Well, I think the groundwork is there because I think, especially on second and third rewatches, um, the scene on the porch where you're sort of saying like, "Oh, well, it's my ex." Like we would yell at each other, like we have a restraining order on me and all this sort of stuff. It's clear that your character is unhinged a bit, you know. So I think there, and then again for my second and third rewatch, realizing that every time he's on the phone, it's because of her. Right, and it's those things where like I have no idea what they're fighting or arguing about, but I know it's something, especially with everything else going on with Fanny, with her and Carlos sort of isolating you and making fun of you.
You are emasculated. Look at you. Look at you. You're emasculated.
After they're stealing the liquor and your food and everything, at the same time getting these angry text messages and phone calls, like it. Not to say, obviously, that I understand where he's going to end up, but it's like character-wise, it's like, oh, it's all built up. It's just eventually going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. You get the sense, I guess, that something, you know, that something will happen. And that if it can be ambiguous, or if it's ambiguous for some folks, then that's awesome. That's great. Goal, happiness achieved.
So you said on Tuesday / today or whenever people are watching this, the film comes out. It's going to be on VOD. Outside of the song being able to be listened to on repeat, are there any other like extras and surprises that you can tell us about?
There will be outtakes, and there may or may not be a commentary with Brendan and I, if we can figure that out. And beyond VOD too, there you know, people have been asking if there's going to be a hard copy, if there'll be hard media, and there will.
Would it be the same day or a bit after?
It'll be further down the line. I think we're looking at March. But okay. VOD first, and people can get a preview of all the, you know, the iTunes package has it all. So it's pretty great.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sitting with me for the last hour and a bit.
Yeah, man. My pleasure. This is great, Andres.
Thank you.